So, welcome to Butterfly Effect Studio. I'm your host, Christian Rebenik. As you know, based in the care theory, small changes can have a big impact. The goal of the session is to uncover how leaders and change makers develop their purpose, their competencies, and their community to achieve a great positive impact. Every of the episode is packed full of ideas you can apply to your own life. In this conversation, I'm very excited to speak to Joel Makower, who is chairman and co-founder of Greenbiz Group, a media and events company focusing on the intersection of business, technology, and sustainability. For more than 30 years, through his writing, speaking, and leadership, he has helped companies to align pressing environmental and social issues with business success. Makower has written more than a dozen books, including strategies for the green economy, the green consumer, the E-factor, the bottom line approach to environmental responsible business, and beyond the bottom line, putting social responsibility to work for your business and the world. The Associated Press has called him also the guru of green business practices. Great to have you in the studio.
So great to be here. Thank you, Christian.
Joel, tell us a little bit more about what motivated you to become actually a leading voice for sustainable business and the clean economy.
Well, I didn't start off with necessarily that vision, but I'm a journalist by training, and I've been self-employed for my entire career, which is to say I've only worked for companies that I've started. I've started or co-founded or founded 3 companies, all in the information and business events and sort of realm. And I studied journalism because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to be if I grew up. And my hypothesis at the time was that I didn't necessarily want to be a journalist, but I thought that by asking questions and interviewing people and poking my nose into other people's business, I would find something that I was good at and interested in and synced with my values and lifestyle and everything else. And for the first 15 years, it turns out that what I was good at and interested in and synced with all that was simply sticking my nose in other people's business and writing about it. But I was also very interested in business from the start. I thought that business was really an important factor and a big engine for change, and also a force to be reckoned with in terms of. I grew up during the consumer movement that Ralph Nader started back in the 70s. And so that was important to me. And so I really started off as a consumer journalist. And I realized in order to understand or to really address consumer issues, you really needed to understand business. So long story shorter is that in 1989, I had written magazine articles in the 70s about solar energy. My first book in 1981 was about the health effects of office environments. So it was about lights and noise and air quality and things like that. What we would now call green buildings, but we weren't at the time. And in 1989, I had the chance to create the U.S. edition of a British bestseller called The Green Consumer Guide. And I created as I said, the U.S. edition, which was published in the run up to Earth Day 1990, which was for those of you old enough to remember, it was a very big media event. Planet Earth was on the cover of every magazine and TV network, and there was this is a lot of attention paid to this, and I was very quickly anointed as an expert on green consumer issues. And I had a weekly syndicated newspaper column in about 90 U.S. newspapers. And then I quickly realized 2 things. There was no green consumer movement in the United States. I looked over my shoulder and realized I was kind of standing there by myself. But the companies I was being asked to come in and talk to about the so-called green consumer movement were themselves doing a lot of really interesting things, struggling with challenges around waste and water and energy and emissions of all sorts. And that was interesting to me, and they were challenged. So I started a monthly newsletter, what we would now call a dead tree snail mail newsletter called the Green Business Letter in 1991. And then I'm old enough to say the sentence, and then the web came along. And I created this website called greenbiz.com, which was just a resource center at the time.
Oh, wow.
And that went live in 2000, and over time that became the company that we are now, about 65 people. We put on 4 big in-person events and a number of virtual events, and we have daily news and newsletters and podcasts and all the things you'd expect from a media company. And we have peer networks to bring together sustainability professionals from mostly big companies to learn from one another. And so we've been doing that for 12 years in the US. We just launched one in Europe, and we're looking to other continents and countries to look at how we do that as well. So that's sort of the gist of it all. But it is, as you said in the intro, all about everything at the intersection of business, sustainability, and what we now call climate tech. It used to be called clean tech, and we can talk about any or all of those things.
So exciting. Thank you very much for sharing this. Such an impressive history, because also you have been so early actually in this part of what you mentioned, the green consumer movement, but actually talking about solar energy in the 70s. That's way earlier than what we see now, where here in Germany, it's like solar is like everybody tries to get solar on his roof, literally, to also reduce his energy costs eventually in this energy crisis we're having today. Yeah, and our listeners, our students, they're joining also because literally want to. It really bothers them. Yeah, but that wasn't maybe back then the case. Yeah, and as an entrepreneur, as many of our students also, you struggle always with this resistance, ignorance eventually. Personal question, how do you deal with that? Because I think also maybe that back then, as mentioned, it's not everybody was saying, oh my God, that's so true, let's change it, So how do you deal with that back then early, just being literally this person here, helping to understand, sharing knowledge, why this is important, when people maybe not understood that and saw that any priority at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we were early to the game, and persistence was a lot of it, just sticking with it. And we've seen a lot of would-be competitors come and go, including some of the big media companies, Fortune and the Wall Street Journal and Reuters and others, and then a lot of smaller players. Patience is a virtue as an entrepreneur. Now, that's not always possible. Finances may not allow that. We were pretty lean to begin with, and I think that we were able to, and we weren't also manufacturing anything, so we didn't have huge capital costs. We could do this. We had an office, but we could have done this from our homes. But part of this is really being nimble and adaptive all along the way. There's an old saying in business school that if your business ends up looking like your business plan, you probably did something wrong. Because you kind of, it's never a straight course, a straight journey. There's always, twists and turns along the way, and you need to be adaptive and rethink things all along the way. And we certainly have done that. And then you also have to bring along your customers. And in our case, we don't think of them as customers. We think of them as members of a community. And that's been really critical. So we have some, we think and what other people tell us are the industry leading events on the profession of sustainability, the circular economy, climate tech and ESG, green finance and ESG, and climate tech, which includes energy, buildings, transportation, sustainable food systems, carbon removal, things like that. And, in some of those things, we were pretty early. We launched a climate tech event. It wasn't called that at the time. It's called Verge, but it was just simply business and technology in 2012 or 2011. I can't remember anymore. I think 2012. And, that was really early for me talking about technology. In fact, clean tech, as it was called then, had just cratered. We had it became political. There were some of the early companies that had a lot of promise, never made money. I was part of one venture capital fund that, invested lots and lots of money and didn't have much to show for it at the end of the 10 years. And so, finding those moments when that look like things aren't, like the market may not even be developing, but seeing an opportunity within that, and then bringing the audience or the community along with you on those journeys, and again, with persistence, that can pay off. And I mean, there's everything else that you need as an entrepreneur around a great team and a great execution strategy and barriers to entry for competition, things like that. But those were part of our secrets to success.
So you started out with, you mentioned that you learned to ask questions. You have been really curious. How do things work? But I think it's one thing, literally ask questions and then condense that and then publish something and then say, and now I want to take action. So what has changed that you actually said now, hey, you asked the close questions, you're curious, you're trying to understand, but what has changed that you all of a sudden want to create businesses and have really impact?
Well, don't undersell the value of curiosity, because curiosity is critical in life, but it's certainly critical in sustainability, because we're all of us in sustainability are forging new paths. There is not a playbook. There is sort of a playbook now, but there certainly wasn't until fairly recently. And there certainly wasn't, 20 years ago or more when we got going, 25 years ago. And that curiosity leads to conversations, leads to relationships, leads to a network building, leads to understanding the community or the customer base or the market, and however you want to think about it. And we all go in with assumptions. All of us have assumptions. Even people who aren't in sustainability have some assumptions. They don't necessarily think of them that way, but it's like, oh yeah, solar, it's not for me, or it's too expensive. I live in a place where the sun doesn't shine, or electric vehicles, I'm going to run out of juice, or they're too expensive. Everyone has some assumption, or this is, and at the extreme, like this is all a scam and there's no real climate crisis or anything of the sort. And so I think helping, being curious and asking those questions, having those conversations helps you, get the reality check that your assumption that may change your assumptions probably will, because the assumptions that we all have on sustainability inevitably are not fully formed and need a lot of input. So I think, as I said, I don't want to undersell the value. What you do with the answers is, first of all, it depends on what your aspirations are, what sector you're in, or what your job function is. If it's, if it's hands-on designing products or supply chain and procurement, that's really hands-on kind of stuff. If you're a fleet manager or a building facilities manager, there's lots and lots of opportunities for hands-on kinds of things. Ironically, if you're in sustainability, a lot of that is more reporting and communications and aligning, internally, and understanding, customer needs, understanding regulatory and societal requirements of companies. And it may not be as hands-on as someone who's really in the weeds, if you will, on the things that companies actually do. So that's one of the maybe paradoxes of sustainability, is that we get things done. Well, not everybody, and not everybody. It doesn't mean they don't have an important job. It doesn't mean that they can't have an impact. It just means that turning this into action can be challenging, and we can talk about why that is. But the reality is, it is.
Super. Yeah, absolutely. So I loved how you put it on very concrete things, and we all have a role to play and can actually take actions. And yes, I know, I agree also. It's very hard. Today we had just students talking about how important it is to also for the individual to measure eventually their carbon footprint. But then often to change behavior is something really, really challenging when it comes to your own change. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's even also one thing is if people tell you to change, or if something you have their own decision actually to change. Maybe I want to take one more step back, because I think it's really inspiring how you advanced in your career and how many things you have done. And talking maybe about your purpose, and you started with this curiosity, but you're doing this still today. You're driving really sustainability in the US, I think, for, I would say, with your community, as you put it. Yeah. So what is your personal motivation every day to keep this driving?
Well, I mean, I just think it's fascinating. Business has been a big part of the problem, and business is a big part of the solution. Business is really the most powerful force in our society these days. And the good news is that businesses knows, in general, I'm speaking of business as a monolith, but I think it applies in this case, generally knows that they need to change. They need to change. They may not know how much they need to change. They may think they just need to change a little bit, when in fact they may need to rethink their entire business model, or help transform the culture or the construct in which their products are delivered and used. But so I just and every day there's something new and exciting going on. There's some new developments. There's some or I hear about a new idea. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. Let me look into that. I would love to share that with the community. Or just to ask questions like, this thing called net positive nature, which is, came out of, we recently had the COP15 and biodiversity conference, and talking about no net loss and net positive nature. A lot of companies are committing to that. What does that even mean? And is that bull, or is that something? And, net zero net zero carbon emissions became a mantra for just about every company, and a lot of the execution of that, it's not changing much of anything because of the way that they're interpreting that or executing that. So exploring those questions or those terms, just again asking questions and trying to reflect back to the world what's really going on here, being an honest broker, if you will, which is to say being an advocate for positive change, but also a realist for the challenges that companies face when they engage in these things. I mean, I love that. That's what gets me going. And then the last thing is that the people, in sustainability tend to be pretty terrific. Not everybody, of course, but being in sustainability is an inherently optimistic profession. We wake up every day thinking about solutions and opportunities. We talk about moonshots, or now earth shots, and we, and big, hairy, audacious goals, and and what could be, and that's an exciting place to be, at least for me. And of course, going from idealism to realism is the big challenge, and that's where all the the effort takes place. That's they say about what is it? Innovation is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, and that's the hard work that goes into actually taking these ideals and making them real. That's what it's all about. And I'm never bored.
It's so exciting. So curiosity is really your driver, or continuously looking for how you can change things for the better. Joel, with having so much done and looking at so many different aspects, looking back, what are you most proud of?
I mean, part of it, I'm proud of just sticking with it all these years, because I think that's paid off, even during the leaner times, or the times when you had to knock on more doors. Now people are knocking on our doors, and and it's I could say well, I saw this 25 years ago or 30 years ago. I'm not sure I did in terms of this way. So I'm really proud that I and our team stuck with it. And the other thing I'm proud of is the team that we have. It's just a really extraordinary team. We have people who are working with us, who have been employed by GreenBiz Group, like my company, who are in their early 30s, who have been with us for 12 years or more, or certainly 10 to 12 years, which means this is pretty much the only job they've had out of college, or it's maybe their second job. And when you think about like what's wrong with them, they should have had three or four jobs by now. If you're a millennial or some early career, but they want to stick with us, and I think that speaks to the company, the culture, obviously the mission, and frankly the fun that we have, and last, I keep using this word, but the community that we've built that really seems to really like us. So it's fun to be us in a way because people are generally appreciative of what we're doing.
Wow. So you mentioned already before the people in sustainability tend to be terrific. I like that, yeah, because it has most likely to do something with also they're pursuing a purpose, so something meaningful. It's like which motivates also them, I think, every day. You talked a little bit about also already about what has helped you in your life. Yeah, you talked about curiosity, how this helped you actually. You talked about asking questions literally continuously, but also about persistence. What would you say, now also talking to our students, what are the other maybe skills or things you have learned and mastered, which you think is really important being in this field?
Yeah, well, I'm a storyteller, and I think that's really critically important. I mean, stories is, we are the only species that really, learns and communicates by stories, and stories are important to us as a species, but they're particularly important when it comes to sustainability. Because think about it, on one hand, we're talking about incredibly complex, technical, geeky, nerdy science and engineering and physics and lots of things that even the experts don't always agree on. And on the other hand, we're talking about our bodies and our families and our kids and our communities and our future. So it's head and heart. And it's really easy. And I'm sure everybody, who's watching this has experienced this, where you go too far in one direction, where it's either, like, I don't know, just over my head. That's just too complicated. I don't get the science, leave that to the experts. Or over here, it's just too California woo-woo, and I say that as a proud Californian, native Californian, where it's not grounded in the reality. And so storytelling is how we integrate head and heart. It's the first step in transparency, and it's the best way we know how to share ideas. So being a good storyteller, if it's just, as a writer, as a speaker, as in social media, however you do it. Now there's so many different platforms in media, ways to do that, whether it's a 10-second TikTok or a 45-minute keynote speech. That's just really critical. Being able to write, not necessarily for publication or even for public consumption, but just being able to communicate to peers, to colleagues, to whoever, in a clear, concise, and compelling way is a really, really critical skill. I mean, on my better days, I still get to commit journalism, but on most, it's not as much as I used to. But those skills of asking questions, of synthesizing, of telling a story in a way that's sort of organized, that's also will draw the reader in, whether the reader is one person or 100,000 people. Those skills I use every single day.
In school, we learn a lot about what is right and wrong. In fact, we don't learn often so much, at least in here, around storytelling, which I think also is one of the it's one of the key skills, and we know this even more since in social media, so many stories which just resonate, and so many just facts don't. Yeah,
and I'll just say, Christian, that most companies are really not good at storytelling. We're having a communications summit at our flagship event in February, in February 2023. To bring together the communications professionals, the sustainability professionals, and the corporate counsel. I refer to that triangle as sort of the Bermuda Triangle of messaging, where messages go in and never to be seen again, because they get the sustainability people have come up with something that's super technical, not very compelling. The communications people, often young and experienced, will come up with something like it turns out it is easy being green, or you can make money and save. It's something that's just so naive and trite and not very helpful. And the legal people will say, no, you can't say that. And by the time they strip out all the potentially problematic things, particularly now that there's greenwashing laws in Europe and probably soon in the US, that you end up with something that doesn't really say anything, or certainly doesn't communicate the level of commitment and achievement and that the company intends to communicate. So that's a big area where companies, for all of the decarbonization and net zero and waste reduction and water efficiency and circular economy issues, being able to talk about this stuff internally, externally, upstream, downstream is really critical.
Maybe what is there anything where you say, hey, this is something, how do you learn storytelling? What's the best way to learn storytelling if you haven't learned that in school?
I guess there's courses in, effective writing. We are all consumers of stories every day, many, maybe hundreds of times a day, whether it's an advertisement or an email or a conversation with anybody, your partner or your kids or your, friends or customers, whoever, colleagues. And those are stories, even if it's 30 seconds. And so, being able to deconstruct those a little bit and what's the, what's been effective? What are the stories that you remember? Not necessarily sustainability. What's the story that you remember that somebody told you once that just captured you? Was it because it was clever, because it was sad, because it was exciting and happy, because it was a big idea, because it was a way of turning an idea that you'd always thought on its head and rethinking it? Those are different. There is this sort of construct about this is true for whether you're giving a speech or a talk or writing something, is what do you want the audience to know? What do you want the audience to do? And how do you want the audience to feel? And that's, do you want them to feel excited? Do you want to feel anxious? Do you want to feel determined? Do you want them to feel motivated, inspired? And what do you want them to do as a result of all that? And not everything has an action behind it. Not every story, it necessarily has to have a feeling, but certainly if you're writing something for public consumption or going to give a talk to at an event or something, thinking about that, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? And how do you want them to feel? Those are good starting places.
Exciting. So we have now the curiosity, persistence, and now storytelling. So you mentioned also that you have an amazing team and people stick around. So the question is, how do you select them? What are you looking in great people you want to work together with? The team members, maybe.
Well, I have to say that I am the co-founder and chairman of this company with 65 employees. None of them reports to me anymore. So I'm not the one who's doing the hiring. And I'm not the CEO. We have a CEO. And so I don't take a lot of credit for that. But it's a tough question, Christian, because it really depends. Are they an analyst who's or a writer? Are they on the sales and marketing side? Are they on the event production side? Are they in the creative web design and visual graphic side of this, or video production? It's all over the map, and so each of those has its own thing. I think people tend to be drawn to us in large part because of the mission. We have to pay a competitive salary. We have to offer competitive benefits, or we actually offer better benefits than most smaller companies. But they tend to be drawn to the mission. And if you, drawing them in is the mission. So how do you keep them? Opportunity to advance, creating a sense of cohesion among the teams, not just within the marketing team or within the editorial team, but across teams, so that everybody feels that we're on the same page, that we're we're all marching together, and that we all like one another. So, we like to work hard and play hard as a company. And it's harder now because post-COVID, or even still COVID, we're not together as much, and our team is much more dispersed around most of the United States, although we have one person in Paris now. And we actually stretch across 12 time zones from Paris to Honolulu. And so, that makes it a little bit challenging for that cohesion. So we have to do it. We do come together at some of our events where the whole team will bring everyone together. And we're getting big enough now that even that's going to be hard. We don't really need 65 people at an event. And, we'll be 75 people in 3 or 4 months because we're just growing. So it just takes a lot of work. We have an all faces meeting, just a Zoom call with 65 people, and once a month. And we try in just 1 hour, not just to communicate what's going on, but also to do little breakouts where we'll have get together groups of 3 or 4, just sort of randomized in many cases, and talk about something that's not even business related. I remember, one of the assignments was pick something that's in the room in which you're sitting that's meaningful to you and share it. I shared, this clock here, which is was on my father's on his desk in his office. He was a dentist for 30 or 40 years. My father's long gone. And this part down here reflects the fire where his office actually, there was a fire in the office and it burned, and this clock was saved. So, and I look at it many times a day, and so just doing that and sharing that with the team was a meaningful experience. Get to know people a little bit better. We're all human. I'm the founder, but I'm just another guy, who's part of the team. I'm not some big anything. And so I think that's really important to creating this feeling of that we're a community as well as the community we're serving.
Now you notice this story with the clock will stick in my mind, I think. Also sharing this. And you mentioned your father, but who is your role model? Do you have a role model still? Is there some people you're looking up to who inspires you every day, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, there's not one person, Christine. There's lots of little things. I channel some people that I know and respect. I'll give you an example. This is not a role model, but this is just a way of channeling. So when I was writing this monthly newsletter, this 8-page monthly, dead tree snail mail newsletter, literally in an envelope in a mailbox, I knew a lot of my subscribers and became friends with some of them. And some of them would tell me, that thing that you wrote about such and such, that was bullshit. You really didn't ask the critical questions. You didn't, I think you fell for what they were saying without, looking deep or whatever they did. And there was one of them in particular who was a friend of mine, and we'd get together for lunch, and she would say this to me. Her name was Shelley. And, she worked for it's in sustainability for one of the big movie studios in Hollywood, and I found myself writing with Shelley sitting on my shoulder, figuratively, obviously, and thinking like, how would she? I'm writing something. What would she say to that? Would she fall for this, or would she call me out on something? And at various times in my career, there were other people. It hasn't been Shelley for a number of years. A number of other people that I just sort of channel. And somebody asked me. I was telling this to somebody recently. He said, "Well, who is it now?" And I thought about it. And I said, I don't have anybody anymore. I don't need that. I know it now. I can do it on my own. But those are the kinds of people, the people that I serve, who inspire me. The people who read what I write, who come to our events, who my peers who are also, who do similar things to what I do. So I pick up little bits and pieces. I could name some names, but there is no one person. There have been so many inspiring people in my career. not just in the sustainability realm, but mostly in sustainability, that they all stick with me in some way and help guide me and inspire me.
Very inspirational. Thank you. We need to come to an end, and maybe asking you a question. Based on your experience, what advice would you give anybody now, literally our students which want to have an impact?
Yeah. Well, I've often said that sustainability in some ways is too important to be left to sustainability professionals. And I'll tell you a little quick story. When I was in journalism school, I was the last year that you could get a BA in journalism at the University of California at Berkeley. And they basically said, if you want to be a journalist, sure, you can take writing classes, but go learn something, learn science, learn physics, learn sports, learn French, learn history, whatever it is. And then if you still want to, you get a master's in journalism, get an MJ, you can do that. And I think I give that similar advice in sustainability, is that, going into sustainability is interesting, but if you really want to succeed, you need to learn something, learn supply chain, learn finance, learn marketing, learn supply chain, learn international trade, and then you can, go in and deploy your green gene with that skill set. But it's really important to know something, to have a body of knowledge that goes beyond sustainability. Because sustainability is an overlay. It's not its own thing. It's really an overlay to everything in business. And so that's where I think it's important to, it's sustainability and whatever that and is up to you. But that's where I would be thinking about, my next career move would be, what do I know and what can I do, and how does sustainability link up with that?
Yeah, resonates so well. That we picked, a master program sustainability and immersion technology to combine interdisciplinary, literally different perspectives. You need to combine to actually contribute something meaningful, and it's also different types of the parts of the brain you put together, literally, to think creative. Thank you so much. Any last advice for our audience here you want to give them? Just
keep at it. Thank you for being in this space. Give a quick plug. You go to greenbiz.com. We have 7 weekly newsletters, all of them free to keep you up to date. You have a podcast, lots of things that you could learn. Just come and learn with us and be on this journey alongside us.
So I can support that. And thank you very much for visiting us in the studio. Thank you very much for being with us. To you, to Lawrence, also Merry Christmas. And a happy holiday season here.
And to you. Thanks so much, Christian.